Hi, Andy XL, back with another NFXL podcast and episode 24 of the 32 State of the Franchise addresses. And I'll look at the Jacksonville Jaguars here. Was this the year that the Jags emerged and maybe established themselves as consistent contenders in the NFL? To answer that in the affirmative, the Jags need to produce a second season where they get results and look good, as they did in the second half of last season. As I will detail here, they kind of got things to fall into place offensively almost by accident. But how they found a new level, now they've found a new level, can they maintain or build on that in 2026? And what do they need to do this off season to do so? Right, a quarterback. Trevor Lawrence threw for 4,000 yards for the third time in his 5-year NFL career, but he did throw 12 picks, which ideally would be reduced to single figures next season. He averaged 265 passing yards a game in the final 7 games of the season, but just 215 in the first 10, and he threw just one pick in the last 7 games of the regular season. So, as with the Jags offense in general, this was a season of two sections, the latter section being where things fell into place, and a lot was to do with the receiver core changing shape, which I will come back to. The challenge for Lawrence next year is to maintain the levels of the latter part of the season, not revert to the numbers of the early part of the season. The Jags will need him to do so if they are to become the consistent and serious contender they desire to be. Right at running back, the Jags ranked just 20th for rushing yards, but fourth for rushing touchdowns. Trevor Lawrence had 9 of the 2020 rushing touchdowns, though, so a lot of them didn't come from the running backs. Travis Etienne had 7 and Basil Tootin 5, as that pair combined for 1,414 yards. Those are modest numbers and need to be improved on in 2026. Etienne had um, a lot of those yards and is a free agent this off-season. And with the Jags not being in a great salary cap position, this is going to be a tough call for them as to whether to bring ETN back. They could franchise tag him, but that would also they may also decide to move on from him given the modest touchdown return they got from him last season. 25 in 66 games with the Jags over 4 seasons are his numbers. So it's a bit of a consistent pattern. Excuse me. At wide receiver, it was from week 10 onwards when this offense transformed into the powerful unit it needed to be, and it was the pass game that did it. And the, if you like, lucky part about this was when Travis Hunter went down in week 7. It prompted the Jags to go get Jacoby Myers, and it also allowed room for Parker Washington to become a real presence, taking a lot of the focus off Brian Thomas, who opposing teams sought to scheme out of the game prior to that time, which poses the question about what to do with Hunter going forward, your first round draft pick, who you drafted as a two-way player. It would seem to make sense to let Thomas, Myers, and Washington continue their excellent work from late last season, and for Hunter to play much less of an offensive role and be used more as an elite cornerback. However, Hunter did average 42.6 yards a game before he got hurt, so there is no doubt he can be a significant presence on offense. But fitting him in alongside Thomas, who averaged 50.5 yards a game, Myers 53.7, and Washington 52.9, um, but 71.3 for Washington after Hunter got hurt, will be a challenge for the Jags, but it's a nice challenge to have. With those four available to them, they certainly have no need at wide receiver this off-season, though depth guys Tim Patrick and De'Ami Brown are free agents. They may be allowed to walk if they decide to use Hunter as a fourth wide receiver. Tight end, with all of that firepower available at wide receiver, the Jags do not need a lot from the tight end group in terms of receiving. Brenton Strange had a second decent year with 540 yards and 3 touchdowns from just 12 games. At that rate, he would have had around 750 yards and 5 touchdowns in a full season, which is just what the Jags need. So this is another position the Jags can leave alone this off-season. On the offensive line, the lack of rushing yardage and 41 sacks Lawrence took might indicate there's room for improvement here. Anton Harrison was good at right tackle, Walker Little was okay on the opposite side. Ezra Cleveland was good at left guard, but Patrick McCarry did not have his best season at right guard. Robert Hainsey did okay at centre, but was not great in pass protection, judged by PFF rating him 34th of 40 centres in that regard. The Jags have invested a good amount of salary cap on this unit and need to see better performance from Macari and Hainsey in particular to justify that expenditure. With a lack of cap space and no first round draft pick, the Jags may roll with what they have here next season, But as a unit, they need to improve on their 2025 levels to take the Jags to the next levels. In terms of draft picks, by the way, the Jags don't have a first round pick, but they do have their second, and then they have three picks in the third round at 81, 88, and 100. So they have got some day two firepower if they haven't got anything on day one. Right, defensive tackle. The Jags were one of the best defenses in the league against the run. Arik Armstead and Devon Hamilton man the interior of their D line have both played well last season, especially Armstead. Both are over 30 and about to enter contract years, though, and with their backups Matt Dickerson and Austin Johnson both being free agents, drafting a young defensive tackle to replace one of them and re sign the other looks like a logical move. On the edge, the Jags lacked much of a presence from their edge rushers last season, getting just 18.5 sacks from them. Emmanuel Ogbah and Dwayne Smoot had just 2.5 of them, and both are free agents. So the Jags could be another team that could look to exploit what looks like a strong, deep edge rusher draft class to add one or two young pass rushers to improve them in that area. It would certainly help them move up on being 17th ranked against the pass last season. Inside linebacker Devin Lloyd and Fayasadi Alukan were the Jags linebackers last season. Both were excellent, but Lloyd's another free agent, and for me is the one they need to make the biggest effort to retain for 2026. That experience and leadership is going to be vital for them, but it might come at a big price. If they do not, if they do bring him back, they're set at inside linebacker. If not, they're definitely going to be weaker here, even no matter how they replace him, because he's pretty much irreplaceable for the Jags right now, I think. Safety. Andrew Wingard, Eric Murray, and Antonio Johnson did the majority of the work here last season. Wingard's a free agent, and given the emergence of Johnson may be expendable and the cap position as well, if they do move on from Wingard, they may well look to replace him via the draft on day two, where, as I say, they have 4 picks at their disposal. Cornerback, starting corners Montaric Brown and Greg Newsome are both free agents. Nickelback Jordan Lewis had a good season and will be back. But given their cap situation, bringing both Brown and Newsome back may be tough to do. Both played well last year. Brown was the better of the two, but if they are not both back, the Jags need to replace one or both of them. Again, looking at those day two picks, but they've only got a certain amount, as I say, so they're going to have to choose wisely. Um, Special teams. Cam Little and Logan Cook both had good seasons and will continue as kicker and punter, respectively. So, in summary, for the Jags, on offense, the need for the Jags next season is to have the performance from Trevor Lawrence and the receiver core of the last 7 games of last season, and for Trevor Hunter for them to find him a role in improving that even further. They also need to get more bang for the bucks. They are paying Patrick McCurry and Robert Hainsey on the O line, and then to get increased touchdown production from the running back position. On defense, they have to re-sign Devin Lloyd first and foremost. Then they need to add more top-end firepower to their pass rushing unit. Once they have done that, they need to do what they can to keep their cornerback trio intact or to find a way to replace anyone that they cannot bring back. Finally, if they're able to use any remaining draft picks at defensive tackle, inside linebacker, and safety, then they should do so. Running back and defense should dominate the Jags' off-season activity, but if they get good work done there and maintain the pass offense that shone last season, they could well be set to at least repeat their strong season of 2025 and possibly even to improve on it. So there's plenty of reasons to be optimistic, Jags fans. Um, so that's your one done with. Next is episode 25 and the surprise package of last season, the Chicago Bears. Well, they're not going to surprise anybody next season because certainly nobody in the NFC North, they're not going to be caught off unawares. But what can they do to retain that division title and maybe even improve themselves a bit like the Jags next season? So that'll be the next one I come up with. See you soon.